The specter of World War III has haunted global politics since the Cold War's end, but never has it felt more tangible than in June 2025, when Israeli F-35s struck Iranian nuclear facilities while American bombers simultaneously demolished underground enrichment sites with 30,000-pound bunker busters, GBU-57 bombs that have never before been used in conflict. This 12-day direct war between Iran and Israel, culminating in unprecedented U.S. military involvement, has fundamentally altered the calculus of global conflict, transforming what was once a shadow war into the first threshold war between a nuclear power and a near-nuclear state. The implications stretch far beyond the Middle East, challenging the foundations of nuclear deterrence, alliance structures, and global stability in ways that could ignite the very conflagration the world has sought to avoid. The Iran-Israel conflict has evolved from proxy warfare to direct military confrontation with alarming speed, creating escalation dynamics that parallel the alliance chains and mobilization timetables that triggered World War I. Unlike previous Middle Eastern conflicts, this confrontation involves a nuclear-armed Israel attacking a threshold nuclear state with near-weapons capability, while major powers maintain competing commitments that could rapidly expand the theater of operations, especially in light of the United States joining the fray. The most dangerous aspect of the current Iran-Israel conflict lies in its nuclear dimensions, specifically what strategists call threshold war dynamics. By June 2025, Iran had accumulated 408.6 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, sufficient to produce weapons-grade material for 9 nuclear weapons within just 3 weeks. This created an unprecedented situation where a nuclear-armed state, Israel, was conducting direct military operations against a near-nuclear adversary racing toward weapons capability. Unlike established nuclear powers with secure second-strike capabilities, threshold states face intense use-it-or-lose-it pressures. Iran's nuclear program advancement to 60% enrichment, for which no civilian justification exists, placed it mere days away from weapons-grade material before Israeli strikes. The June 13th Israeli operation, targeting the Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow facilities, aimed to destroy Iran's nuclear infrastructure before it could cross the weapons threshold. However, the attacks may have accelerated rather than deterred Iranian nuclear ambitions, as Tehran now faces an existential threat to its deterrent capabilities. This dynamic differs fundamentally from Cold War nuclear crises. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, both superpowers possessed secure nuclear arsenals and understood mutual destruction. Today's Iran-Israel conflict involves a vulnerable threshold state that must choose between accepting military defeat or attempting a desperate nuclear sprint. The compressed timeline for nuclear breakout, potentially achievable in 2 to 3 days at the Fordow facility before its destruction, creates decision-making pressures that traditional crisis management mechanisms cannot address. The involvement of the United States in direct strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities has further destabilized deterrence calculations. Trump administration officials described the attacks as completely obliterating Iran's nuclear enrichment capabilities, but such claims ignore the decentralized nature of nuclear knowledge and Iran's demonstrated ability to rebuild destroyed facilities. The precedent of preventive nuclear strikes by a superpower against a threshold state fundamentally alters global non-proliferation dynamics and may encourage other states to accelerate their own nuclear program preemptively. Furthermore, it remains to be seen whether or not Iran was able to vacate some of these sites of some of their most important materials prior to the attacks. The degradation of Iran's proxy network, the so-called axis of resistance, has paradoxically increased rather than decreased the risk of broader conflict. Israel's systematic destruction of Hamas and Hezbollah leadership, combined with the fall of Assad's Syria, has eliminated Iran's primary conventional deterrent capabilities. The September 2024 pager attacks that wounded 4,000 Hezbollah operatives and the subsequent assassination of Hassan Nasrallah dismantled the organization's command structure, while Hamas has been operationally crippled following the Gaza conflict. This proxy degradation creates a strategic paradox. Iran's conventional deterrent has been largely eliminated, increasing incentives for nuclear acceleration, while Israel's tactical successes have created new vulnerabilities. The Houthis remain Iran's most active proxy, having attacked 60 vessels in the Red Sea and disrupted $1 trillion in global trade, but their geographic isolation limits their strategic impact. Iraqi militias have remained largely inactive, deterred by government pressure and potential U.S. retaliation. The alliance dimensions present even greater escalation risks. The United States has crossed the threshold from providing defensive support to conducting offensive operations against Iranian nuclear facilities. This direct involvement activates extended deterrence commitments and could trigger broader coalition responses. Gulf states, while publicly neutral, have reportedly provided intelligence support for Israeli operations while maintaining diplomatic channels with Iran. This complex web of formal and informal alliances creates multiple pathways for conflict expansion. China's position as Iran's primary oil customer, importing 91% of Iranian exports, creates economic incentives for Beijing to prevent complete Iranian collapse, while Russia's strategic partnership with Iran must be balanced against Moscow's relationships with Israel and Gulf states. If the conflict escalates to threaten Iran's territorial integrity or regime survival, both powers might feel compelled to provide more substantial support, potentially drawing them into direct confrontation with the US-Israel alliance. The economic dimensions of the Iran-Israel conflict extend far beyond regional boundaries, threatening critical global supply chains and energy security. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of global oil trade transits daily, remains Iran's most potent weapon for escalating the conflict globally. Iranian parliamentary authorization for strait closure has been approved, with final decision-making authority resting with the Supreme National Security Council. The technical feasibility of disrupting Hormuz shipping has been demonstrated repeatedly. Iran's ability to mine the strait's narrow 2-mile navigable channels, combined with anti-ship missiles and small boat swarms, could effectively close the waterway for weeks or months. Unlike the 1980s tanker wars, which saw disruption but never complete closure, current Iranian capabilities are significantly more sophisticated. The global economic implications would be immediate and severe. Oil prices spiked 13% to $77 per barrel on initial strikes and approach $100 per barrel during sustained conflict scenarios, while Saudi Arabia and the UAE maintain 5.7 million barrels per day of spare capacity. Alternative routes like the Saudi East-West Pipeline and UAE's Fujairah Pipeline have limited capacity compared to Hormuz throughput. LNG markets would face even greater disruption, with 90 billion cubic meters annually, 20% of global LNG trade transiting the strait. Beyond energy, the conflict has revealed vulnerabilities in global supply chains. Commercial aviation routes across Iran, Iraq, and Jordan have closed repeatedly, disrupting Europe-Asia connectivity. The semiconductor supply chain, already fragile from geopolitical tensions, faces additional stress as regional instability affects critical mineral supplies and transportation routes. These economic disruptions create powerful incentives for major powers to intervene, either to secure energy supplies or prevent global economic collapse. The Iran-Israel conflict has witnessed unprecedented cyber warfare escalation that complicates traditional escalation control mechanisms. Iranian cyber operations have increased by 700% since June 13th, targeting not only Israeli infrastructure but also U.S. critical systems. The Cyber Avengers and Handala groups have demonstrated capabilities against water systems, industrial control networks, and financial institutions, though their sophistication remains at mid-level organized crime, according to intelligence assessments. Israel's cyber capabilities, centered on Unit 8200, represent a qualitative advantage similar to the Stuxnet operation that previously targeted Iranian nuclear facilities. Current suspected operations include attacks on Iranian banking systems and nuclear facility networks, though official acknowledgement remains limited due to operational security concerns. The cyber domain's ambiguous thresholds create new escalation risks. Unlike conventional attacks with clear attribution and proportional response options, cyber operations can affect both military and civilian targets simultaneously. Attacks on nuclear command and control systems could trigger miscalculation or accidental escalation, particularly given the compressed decision-making timelines created by cyber warfare's speed. While the Iran-Israel conflict presents significant World War III risks, comprehensive analysis reveals it faces competition from other dangerous flashpoints. The China-Taiwan scenario ranks marginally higher compared to Iran-Israel due to direct superpower confrontation potential and automatic alliance obligations under the US-Japan Security Treaty. The Ukraine-Russia conflict presents NATO Article 5, but benefits from somewhat better escalation control mechanisms and economic constraints limiting Russian capabilities. North Korea's nuclear program creates regional risks, but lacks the global alliance implications of Middle Eastern conflicts. The Iran-Israel conflict's unique danger lies in its combination of active warfare, threshold nuclear dynamics, and critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. Unlike other flashpoints that remain in crisis or proxy phases, direct Iranian-Israeli military confrontation has already commenced, with U.S. forces actively engaged. This reality testing of deterrence and escalation control mechanisms under battlefield conditions creates unprecedented risks. The historical precedent most relevant to current dynamics is the 1914 alliance chain activation that transformed a regional crisis into global war. Modern alliance structures, while different from the automatic mobilization commitments of 1914, create similar escalation pressures through extended deterrence obligations and security guarantees. The Iran-Israel conflict represents more than a regional dispute. It constitutes a stress test of the global security architecture established after World War II. The failure of nuclear deterrence mechanisms, degradation of alliance solidarity, and weaponization of economic interdependence signal fundamental challenges to international stability. Whether this conflict escalates to global war or remains contained will establish critical precedents for crisis management, nuclear proliferation, and great power competition in the 21st century. The most likely outcome remains a prolonged, low-level conflict with periodic escalation spikes rather than immediate global war. The ceasefire initiated by Trump, though loosely followed, has made some headway in abating the violence. However, the structural factors, threshold nuclear dynamics, alliance obligations, and economic vulnerabilities create multiple pathways for uncontrolled escalation. The compressed decision-making timelines imposed by modern warfare technology, combined with the absence of reliable communication channels between adversaries, suggest that when escalation occurs, it may happen too rapidly for traditional diplomatic intervention. While the Iran-Israel conflict may not be the most likely trigger for World War III, it represents the most active and immediate test of global stability mechanisms and is certainly a significant risk for the prospect of world war. The success or failure of containing this conflict will determine whether the international system can manage the intersection of nuclear proliferation, alliance competition, and economic warfare that characterizes 21st century strategic competition. In that sense, the current crisis serves as both a warning and a preview of the challenges that will define global security for decades to come. Bringing you the latest in news and analysis, this has been the Ergo Report. Thanks for tuning in.